Good morning, everyone. It's Mrs. Vanders here. Today, we are going to do our experiment first again. That way, if you want to watch it again, it's very easy to find. So, we are going to start right into the scientific method. So, the first part about setting up a science experiment is asking the question. So, my question today is, what happens when I combine yeast with hydrogen peroxide? So, then the next part is doing some research about what is going to happen. So I did a little bit of research, and when you combine the two together, they might produce some gas. So the next part is setting up a hypothesis. So this is guessing, educated guess, about what is going to happen when you combine the yeast with the hydrogen peroxide and what is going to happen inside the flask. The next part is setting up the experiment. So I've set up the experiment for you guys. I have a flask and a tablespoon and a measuring cup and all the ingredients. So after that is recording our observations. So we're going to record what we see happening in the flask and happening outside of the flask. And finally, our conclusions. And that is what we write down about what has happened after the experiment and why we think it has happened. All right, so let's get into this experiment. So here is our setup. There's a lot going on this. Make sure you guys can see it. So, first step is we are going to add some yeast into this water. I've already added the water because it's a bit easier, but we're going to add 1 tablespoon of yeast. So this is what it looks like before. Little tiny balls. And we're going to add it into this water to rehydrate it, because right now it's been freeze dried. And so we're going to add it into the water to give it, to allow it to come back to life. All right, so this is what it looks like before. And we're going to let it sit while we do the rest of the setup. The next part is we are going to add hydrogen peroxide, a half a cup of hydrogen peroxide into my measuring cup. And we're going to pour it into my flask. You can use a funnel if you'd like to. That's kind of fun sometimes. So we have it here. The next part is we're going to add a squirt of dish soap. And we'll talk about why we did that after. I'm mixing it around. The nice part about a flask is it's really easy to mix. And then I'm going to add a squirt of food coloring on each side to make it look kind of like toothpaste when it comes out of the flask. I'm going to move all of these out of the way. So I can smell that the yeast is starting to reconstitute. It has a very particular smell. So I'm going to show you what it looks like now. So it's kind of started to get murky in the water, and there's a few bubbles happening. So usually when you're using yeast and you're baking, you would add some water and you'd add a little bit of sugar to give it some food, so it would start to go a little bit faster and it'd be much happier. But for our experiment, we don't need to do that. All right, so I think we are ready to add the yeast into the flask. Whoa. You guys notice what's happening coming out of the flask? So they call it elephant toothpaste because it looks like it's big enough that they could put on their toothbrush and eat it. So what's happening here is that when you combine the hydrogen peroxide with the yeast, the hydrogen peroxide starts to break down the yeast cells and it produces carbon dioxide. And so then the carbon dioxide bubbles and foams. And so because we added soap, it traps the gas bubbles into the soap bubbles and it causes it to foam over. So that is our experiment for today. It's kind of a fun and messy one. All right, so if you would like to write down your observations and conclusions, I have again made a fun little form for you to fill out with a picture of a flask, and you can draw what has happened in the flask today. And then for some older students, they'll have a Google form for you to fill out, and of course you're welcome to draw what has happened to the flask. You can see on this side the foam and the nice big mess. It's still slowly going because it's still breaking down those yeast cells. Okay, so now we are going to talk about microorganisms because yeast is a type of microorganism. It is a type of fungi. So, a little bit about microorganisms. Microorganisms, also called microbes, cannot be seen unless you use a microscope. So micro means tiny, and organism means a living creature. They are found everywhere, in soil, air, water, on your skin, and even in your digestive tract, which includes your intestines and colon. Most of the time, when they are in the right place, the majority of microorganisms are not harmful to people and often do a lot of good, such as breaking down waste and making bread. We couldn't live without them. There is a huge variety of microorganisms. They make up the largest number of living organisms on the planet. There are trillions and trillions of microbes. There are trillions of microbes around the earth, maybe more. The five types of living microorganisms are bacteria, viruses, fungi, algae, and protozoa. So next I'm going to show you a picture. So this is a bacteria picture. It is under an electron microscope. That's how you can see it so well. So that makes it so you can. So this is a picture of a bacteria. It was done under an electron microscope so that you can see it so well. So I'm going to tell you about bacteria. So bacteria are tiny one-celled creatures that get nutrients from their environments in order to live. Some bacteria can be useful, such as certain types found in your intestinal tract. So the next one is a virus. This is also under an electron microscope, so you get to see a lot of the outside of the cell and all the different. So this is a virus, and it was done under an electron microscope as well, and you get to see a lot of the detail on the cell. All right, so viruses need to be inside living cells to grow and reproduce. Most viruses can't survive very long if they're not inside a host, which is a living thing like a plant, animal, or person. Some viruses live for a short time on surfaces such as handles, knobs, and countertops, so it is very important to wash your hands often. So the next one we're going to talk about are fungi, which is the yeast part of it, but they're also mushrooms. So fungi are multi-celled plants-like organisms. Unlike other plants, fungi cannot make their own food from soil, water, or air. Instead, fungi get their nutrition from plants, people, or animals. So if you notice in this picture, it's sitting on top of, it's actually a piece of wood. And so they're getting their nutrition from the wood. The next one we're going to talk about is algae. So notice the algae on top of the water. So algae are organisms that are found in water like lakes, ponds, and oceans. Algae are very important because they make much of Earth's oxygen, which humans and other animals need to breathe. Some algae, such as seaweed, look like plants. However, algae are actually neither plants or animals. And the last one we're going to talk about is protozoa. And this one's also under an electron microscope. That's how you get all the fun details and colors. So protozoa are one-cell organisms that love moisture and often spread diseases through water. Some protozoa cause intestinal infections that lead to upset stomachs and stomach pain. So I have top 10 facts about microorganisms. So microorganisms first appeared on Earth about 3.5 billion years ago. They were very important in sustaining life on our planet. Microbes generate at least half the oxygen we breathe. Microbes thrive in extremes of heat, cold, radiation, pressure, acidity, and darkness, and often where no other life form exists, and where nutrients can only come from inorganic matter. Typically, there are between 10,000 and 10 million bacteria on each of your hands. So I have about 20 million bacteria on my hands. Typically, there are between 10,000 and 10 million bacteria on each of your hands. That's why it's important to wash your hands. The number of germs on your fingertips double after you use the toilet. Also another important reason to wash your hands. When you cough, germs can travel about 3 meters if you do not cover your nose and mouth. Almost 1 million bacteria can be created by one person in a school day. There are more bacterial cells in our body than there are human cells. Whoa. While some bacteria on the outside of your body can cause infections, the bacteria inside your body can protect against it. Studies have shown that animals without gut bacteria, so like your intestinal, while some bacteria on the outside of your body can cause infections, the bacteria inside your body can protect against it. Studies have shown that animals without gut bacteria are more likely to catch serious infections. So humans have used bacteria to help us in other ways for thousands of years. Bacteria are used to make yogurt and cheese. The flavor of these foods come from the bacterial byproducts. Did you know if you pick up a handful of garden soil, you will be holding hundreds, if not thousands, of different kinds of microbes. 1 single teaspoon of soil can contain 1 billion bacteria and thousands of fungi and algae. The work that soil microbes do in our soil is very complex, but it all boils down to this. Microbes eat so we can eat. Plants are not able to take the nutrition they need from the soil without microbes working in the soil. Microbes are alive and must have nutrition to survive, and the nutrition comes from organic matter, which is the soil. As microbes consume the nutrients they need, they create foods like nitrogen, carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and trace minerals for our plants. It is the microbes that convert the minerals in the soil into a form our plants can use to grow and produce food and flowers for us. Infectious disease experts know that when we have a cough or cold, the virus particles can travel at 320 kilometers an hour and up to 900 meters. That is faster than a passenger jet at takeoff. When you cough, germs can travel about 3 meters if you do not cough into your arm or your hand or your handkerchief over your nose and mouth. It is also important to wash your hands thoroughly after you go to the bathroom. There are a lot of bacteria in the bathrooms, and they can multiply quickly in warm, damp places. So what we take from this is really important to wash your hands. So thank you for doing the experiment and learning a little bit about microorganisms. I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye, guys!